Welcome back to A Dorm Divided on 88.9 KSTM The Storm. I'm Jake Brend. With me today is Aaron Price. We talked about it last week. We said it was going to get warm, and it is finally warm. It's a beautiful Iowa day out there. How are you enjoying the weather, Aaron?
Oh, it's awesome. It's like 38 degrees, but it feels like it's like 55. It's great.
It feels like March Madness
I
should be
know.
starting tomorrow.
I know.
I was very unfortunate. I've received very unfortunate news this morning to find out that Iowa State basketball still has 4 games left. For some reason, I was under the impression that they had won.
Yeah, because the Big 12 just like recently reset their schedules.
Yep.
And I don't know what it took so long to do it, but
It's because Baylor.
it's because
Baylor missed 6 or 7 games. So Iowa State's got 4 games left. Really just a limp to the finish. They actually nearly pulled off the upset last night at Baylor. They would have been the first team to beat Baylor all season. They led by as many as 17 points early in the first half.
Yeah, they were playing well.
So we're going to be talking about Iowa State basketball and what they should do with Steve Prohm. After that, we're going to be previewing Iowa basketball's big week. They play 2 top 5 teams, and then we'll dive into their March a little bit. After that, we'll get into the NBA and talk about all-star snubs, who deserved to make it, who didn't deserve to make it. And then there were a little bit of Kristaps Porzingis trade rumors that we'll discuss a little bit. And then if we have time, we're going to be talking about the Denver Nuggets win last night, just because I have a lot to say. And then if we're really running low on time, we will be talking about what the Cowboys should do with Dak Prescott. But I would imagine we're not going to talk about that. So I say we just dive right into Iowa State basketball. As you know, Iowa State basketball is awful.
Yep.
Just absolutely terrible. They're 2-17, last in the Big 12. They're 0-14 in conference. They haven't won a game since December 20th in a 15-point home win over Jackson State. Before that, their last win came in the first game of the season against Arkansas Pine Bluff. A 17-point win at home that they actually started out down like 12-0. It was horrible. But other than that, Iowa State has not showed up in the win column all season long. They haven't won since Christmas, and actually last night was the closest they've been to winning a game since they lost by 4 at home to West Virginia. So what we saw last night was, I think, a little bit of rust from Baylor, just coming off of they haven't played a game since they beat Auburn. Oh no, it was Texas, since they played Texas on like February 5th or something like that. So nearly a 3-week layoff. And Iowa State just came out hot. Tyler Harris started out 4 or 5 from 3, and Iowa State led at the break by 5, but Baylor just out-toughed them down the stretch.
Yeah, I mean,
The better team clearly won.
you knew it was gonna happen some way. Iowa State wasn't gonna. I mean, it wasn't really Iowa State. Iowa State just was playing how they normally play. It's just Baylor was just missing shots and not playing well.
Mm-hmm.
So they had some rust to break off, but I mean, it would have been interesting to see Iowa State win. That would have been, I don't know. It would have raised some questions.
Last night was probably the only time all season where I could say Iowa State legitimately played well. If they play any other team in the Big 12 last night, they probably win that game, which I would say is somewhat inspiring. Tyler Harris had 22. Rajir Bolton had 21. Other than that, Jalen Coleman-Lance had 13 points, but Iowa State looked like a competent basketball team last night. Sure, they were. I mean, they are the worst 3-point shooting team in the Big 12, and they shot 10 of 21 last night, so that's obviously going to fluctuate things a little bit. But that's just kind of the sport of basketball. But nonetheless, Iowa State still moved to 0-14 in conference. And as we were saying, they've just got 4 games left down the stretch. So not that much time for Steve Prohm to figure it out. But I think if there's one thing Steve can do, it is try and build for next year, try and build hope, because what we're going to talk about right now is Jamie Pollard and the Boosters are going to have a decision to make in the upcoming weeks about what to do with Steve Prohm's future. So we've been actually discussing this a lot in our sports marketing class with Professor Clint Huntrods, just about what Iowa State should do from a business perspective, from a winning perspective. Aaron, I'm curious to grab your thoughts on what Iowa State should do with Steve Prohm in this upcoming offseason.
So yeah, this is the second year in a row where they aren't very good. I think last year they got what 9th or 10th in
last.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so back to back, probably back-to-back years, finishing last in the conference. You kind of saw before this, you had hope, like when Wigington was a freshman, and gosh, who else did they have? Weiler Babb, I think they still had. Donovan Jackson when they didn't make the playoffs, and then the next year, then they win the Big 12.
Would have been 2018.
Yeah. So usually what you see from Prohm is kind of how when he's been there, they've always got this kind of big transfer that they get. 1 year is Mariel Shayok. That's just how Iowa State's always been. They've always got these transferred. You never really see 4-year players come through their program and kind of stay the whole thing. I mean, Niang and Morrison did that all, but you just don't have that this year. I think that's what they kind of banked on this year. I couldn't tell you any of their. I mean, I hadn't heard. Razier Bolton's all right. This Tyler Harris kid I never even heard of before. I don't even think he played against Iowa.
He might have been hurt that game.
Okay.
Tyler Harris was recruited by Iowa State out of high school, but he went to Memphis.
Yep.
And he averaged like 13 or 14 a game at Memphis, but transferred over. And he's a good player. He's a good shooter. He's streaky, but he's also 5'7".
Yeah.
So he's very limited on defense and
Yeah.
everything else on the floor. So he's kind of on a tournament team. He'd be a really good sixth man.
Yeah. And then your big recruit freshman Xavier Foster's hurt.
Mm-hmm.
And he hadn't really been. You could tell something was off with him at the beginning of the season when he was getting minutes. But not a win in the Big 12. You can't get much worse than that. You can't get much worse than that. I don't see anything happening in the near future. Next year, I don't see how they're going to be playing 500 basketball or above 500 basketball like they're known for. But yeah, he's a nice guy. Actually, I've never had anything wrong with him. I don't know. I don't see how you can keep him around unless, the buyout's too big, which I don't think it is.
No. So the thing with Steve Prohm, he's a nice guy. I've cheered for him from the start, but I can also admit that pretty much no matter where he was at, he was in a tough position.
Yeah.
He was not going to be able to be better than Fred Hoiberg. Because one, I think Fred built a good program. Two, Fred got extremely lucky. And three, Fred had ultimate fan support no matter what. So the Fred Hoiberg project worked out. It was a risk, no doubt. He'd never coached before that. And Steve Prohm was more of the traditional small school guy who'd been pretty successful. Give him a bigger option. And he was in a very tough position from the start. He was able to inherit his first year. George Niang's senior year, they were a top 5 team. In the year following, he still had Naz Mitru Long on his 5th year. He had Monte Morris, Matt Thomas, Deontay Burton, and that team was very good. And the next year, everyone knew and expected it to be a rebuilding year. And although they missed the tournament and were bad, they still had a star freshman, Lindell Wigginton. Everyone knew Mariel Shayok was coming in. Cam Lard was good. And you have the 2018-19 season where you have sophomore Lindell Wigginton, freshman Taylor Horton Tucker's in the NBA now. You have freshman Tyrese Halliburton come in out of nowhere and arguably be the best player on the team. Mariel Shayok was I believe, 3rd-team All-American. And add that in with Cam Lard, Solomon Young. You've got a really good team, and that's really where I think the Steve Prohm project fell apart because he assembled this team, but there were risks with it.
Yep.
So I was at the game. It was like January 25th. Iowa State beat number 3 Kansas by 20 points at home, and it wasn't even close. Tyrese Halliburton had like 22 points. He was just hitting dagger after dagger, and it literally looked like Iowa State was the best team in the Big 12. It looked like they were one of the best teams in the country, and after that point, Iowa State lost at some point in February their last 7 games of the season. There was one game where West Virginia had a down year, and they were last place in the Big 12, and they beat Iowa State by like 30 on their home court. And Iowa State fell apart, won the Big 12 tournament, so they got a high enough seed as a 6th seed, but got upset by Ohio State. So it was, looking back on it, in maybe 20, 25 years, you'll be like, oh, wow, that was a tournament team, won the Big 12 tournament, had guys in the NBA, was probably a success. But in hindsight, that was a massive disappointment of a season.
Yeah. That kind of honestly reminds me of Iowa, how they were. Geez, it would have been like 4 or 5 years ago when they had Utah, Gazelle, Woodbury, Clements. We knew that was a really good team, just like the Mariel, Shayok, Halliburton, all those guys, that team. And then we knew it was going to, the next couple of years were going to be a little rough, and we were prepared for that. And the next 2 years were rough, and then in that third year, which would have been, let's see, that would have been 2 years ago when we made the NCAA tournament, lost to Tennessee, almost beat them,
almost came back.
Yep. And then but we never hit like as low as Iowa State. Like, we were competing with teams, and Iowa State isn't like, they've had a couple Big 12 games where they're competing with them, but it's just like you see them lose to like a South Dakota State, and it's like, that shouldn't happen. I mean, you got to win your non-conference games, because at least Iowa was doing that, and they had there was like no reason to get rid of Fran, because you knew you had 5 seniors starting and everyone was going to come in.
And that's where you really get into things, and that's where I empathize with Prohm. So with the Horton Tucker, Wigginton, Lard year, he knew that he was taking that risk to get the program back to where it once had been, and he was pretty darn close. That team very well, if the chemistry would have meshed together in February, that team very well could have made an Elite Eight type run.
Yeah.
But it went worst case scenario, I guess, other than the Big 12 championship. But in the offseason, Horton Tucker declares for the draft. Wigginton declares for the draft. Cameron Lard drops out. I think he's playing in Mexico now. And Shayok graduates as expected. So you go from, in your starting 5, 4 all Big 12 level players to plus Halliburton to just Halliburton. And that's where, even with Halliburton last year, you could just tell that the roster around him was not built to win. Solomon Young would make a really good 6th or 7th man on a very good team. He is not good as a second option. Rasir Bolton, I think, played very well off of Tyrese Halliburton, but he's way too turnover prone and he is way too mistake prone to lead a team. And then you get into this year, and it's somehow much worse than last season. Xavier Foster had a concussion in the preseason and mono, so he was not conditioned or in game shape, and he didn't really know the plays the first few weeks of the season, and he's out for the season with an injury. Tyler Harris has been good. Javon Johnson has been good. Jalen Coleman-Lands has been good. But none of those players are going to carry a team to the tournament. Now you look into next year, you have everyone coming back.
Exactly, yeah.
Except for Solomon Young.
Yeah.
But the problem is the people coming back aren't going to lead you to an NCAA tournament.
They could. I mean, when Iowa had this, no one thought that either, except we had Tyler Cook, who we knew he could dominate. He was a dominant post player. He could score at the post, but we never no one expected Jordan Bohannon could just shoot. Who else did we have in that class? Isaiah Moss was all right. Isaiah Moss kind of reminds me of Rasir Bolton. They're kind of similar players. And then we had younger freshmen like Joe Wieskamp come in that year that we made the tournament, but we never really had guys that you'd think would lead you to an NCAA tournament team, but they mesh together pretty well. Mm-hmm. And you kind of need your leading scorer, a guy that you can kind of go to at the end of the game, which Iowa State really doesn't have that right now.
No.
We kind of had Tyler Cook, and now we have Garza and Wieskamp, but it's all about meshing it together. If you're not going to get any good ESPN top 100 recruits like Iowa rarely ever does, then you need to get these other guys to mesh together.
So say what you want about Fran McCaffrey, he can draw up a play at the end of a game.
Mm-hmm.
Steve Prohm, his biggest weakness has always been drawing up plays. Iowa State has, as far as my memory goes, has not hit a game-winning shot since the Monte Morris team. It's just, I believe it was the West Virginia game. I was watching it in your car on the way to tennis. And Iowa State had a shot to win the game last possession, and Bolton just stood there. No one moved, and then they ran this weird horns play at the top of the key. Bolton ran into Solomon Young, game over. And that's where Steve Prohm drawing up winning plays and drawing up plays out of a timeout, that's where he lacks as far as, I think his biggest problem in coaching ability is actual in-game coaching stuff. And I think that's where Iowa State either needs to, one, get rid of Steve Prohm, which I think would be the most optimal option. But if you don't do that, I think you have to demand to Prohm that he gets rid of his entire staff and completely rejuvenates it. Because I think that's the only way that it can work. He needs to have an assistant coach that can just go out there and draw up a play to win a game. And that's where, say what you want about how Fred Hoiberg won with all the transfers, and you can call it cheap. He won by being the best coach in college basketball at out-of-bounds plays. He was very well known for that.
Yeah, it doesn't matter how you get guys on your team. All that matters is that you get them on your team, and it doesn't matter how long you have them either. You should be able, if you're a good enough coach, you should be able to compete with teams in a Power 5 conference every single year, which is Iowa State's not doing. In my opinion, they should wipe everyone out.
Yeah, and that's where I feel like on Iowa State, you can use the Iowa argument, like, oh, maybe Bolton turns into an all-conference guy, and Xavier Foster's a good big man, and you can maybe talk yourself into the roster becoming good enough one day, but I can't talk myself into Steve Prohm coaching that team, willing his way into that team being a good team, because we saw it when they had two NBA. Tyrese Halliburton's a future NBA All-Star. I think there's no doubt about that. And then Talen Horton-Tucker is probably a future NBA starter. And then you had a 22-point game scorer, a very good big man, a deep bench, and Prohm kind of coached that team away. I don't know if you remember that season, but Lindell Wigginton got hurt in the opener, and he kept him on the bench when he returned. So he made him the sixth man.
Yeah, I do.
And Wigginton was not happy about that.
Yeah.
And that was a coaching decision that Steve Prohm made and he went with, and it ended up, I think, hurting the chemistry in the long run. So I think if there's a way to get Iowa State basketball back, one, it's going to take time. It's going to take 2 or 3 years. And I think it's very easy to talk about Iowa State good in the mid-2010s because of transfers. But if you look at it, the reason Iowa State basketball was good was they had 4-year guys and you sprinkled transfers in. Outside of Royce White, the best players that were in that Iowa State era were George Niang, Monte Morris, Matt Thomas, Naz Long, Melvin Edgum. Those were the core. You throw DeAndre Kane in there, who was a transfer added to it. Good. You throw in Will Clyburn, Corey Lucius, Deontay Burton. The way that Iowa State's going to get back is recruiting like Iowa does. You recruit Garza to be a 4-year guy, Bohannon to be a 4-year guy. Keegan Murray will probably be a 4-year guy. And right now, Steve Prohm is just, it seems every offseason he's trying to assemble like half transfers, half maybe 4-year guys that are going to combine, and it hasn't worked yet. And they've got Tyrese Hunter, 4-star from Wisconsin, coming in next season, who I think could be very good. Maybe he fits very well with Xavier Foster and Iowa State turns it around. But I think right now the most optimal option would be to move on from Steve Prohm in the offseason. If the buyout is an issue, maybe push it to next season. But I don't think the buyout should be an issue with Jamie Pollard had the recent announcement that the football revenue was much more than they expected it to be this season. So the athletic department actually I'm trying to think what the word would be. They have an overcorrection, so they have money to spend.
Yeah.
So I think that would be the best direction to go as far as the basketball program. But that's enough about Iowa State. They are not fun to watch.
Got to talk about them, though. It's your team.
Yeah, you still got to talk about them. But we're going to move 2 hours east and talk about Iowa basketball. They have a massive week coming up. They're coming off of a 4-game win streak, beating Rutgers, Michigan State, Wisconsin, and Penn State. Tomorrow night they play Michigan up in Ann Arbor at 6 p.m., and then on Sunday, they play at Ohio State in Columbus at 3 p.m. So it's a massive 2-game stretch for the Hawkeyes. They're ranked 9th right now, sitting at 4th in the Big Ten. Aaron, you want to take me a little bit about how Iowa's looked the last couple weeks?
Yeah, they've played extremely well. C.J. Frederick's back. He's been playing all those 4 games. To me, he's a key factor in them winning basketball games. All the games that they've lost, or at least majority of them, he hasn't played in. I'm not sure why. That just is a big difference to me. It just feels like it is. Our bench is way more thin without him, because then we have to start Keegan Murray, and then Nunji and Toussaint have to get more minutes. But they look good again now. They look like they should be looking all year. They look like how we all expected them to be throughout this whole year. And I'm optimistic. I do believe that we have a run in us. I feel like when you have arguably the best player in college basketball, you teams like that don't get upset when you have the best, especially a post player, because just talking about in March Madness, you don't see those underdog teams being able to guard, big men like that.
Dominant big men.
Yeah, because he's going to go out against those teams and score 30 points like it's nothing. It's just a whether or not how we shoot. Joe Wieskamp is playing extraordinary right now. I mean, he's brought his 3-point percentage up to about almost 50%. C.J. Frederick shooting 50%, even though he hasn't played in all of the games. But I think with Wieskamp's play, if he's playing like he is, I mean, he is making contested three after contested three, and just playing with all sorts of confidence, like he's a legitimate NBA player. And when he's doing that, then it's like, wow, like this is going to be exciting. I'm looking forward to it. This is a big stretch for us. I think if we win somehow both of these games, we're definitely in the top 5, maybe even the third best. I'm not sure if we pass Michigan because we have 6 losses, and that would only be their second. But, if we win both of these games, we could be in that conversation again about being a number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. But, yeah, that's ultimately the goal. They're playing well again. It's fun to watch. They're playing good basketball at the best time of the year that they need to be playing it, and their toughest stretch of the year. So this week is exciting week. I know me and Luke have been jittery about it. We're looking forward to watching the game tomorrow. But, we'll have to see still. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah, so after this week, Iowa kind of gets to level off a little bit.
They get their game with
Nebraska. They
Nebraska.
get Nebraska and Wisconsin, and they just pummeled Wisconsin on the road.
Yep.
So, I guess we've talked about how home court advantage isn't that important, but playing them in Iowa City should be a little easier, and then they get into the Big Ten tournament. But I watched a little bit of the Penn State game, and I watched a little bit of the Michigan State game, and it really does come down to Joe Wieskamp. If he scores 12 points, they're probably not winning, but if he comes out and scores 22, there's not a lot of teams in the country that can beat Iowa, and right now, I'd say they've played themselves back into the conversation of the 2 line.
Yep.
I think Joe Lunardi still has them at a 3 seed in his latest bracketology.
Yeah, they're like the top 3 seed right now.
But if you knock off either Michigan or Ohio State and then manage to beat Nebraska, Wisconsin, I think that is more than enough for a 2 seed, barring any upset in the Big Ten tournament, which has not been friendly to Iowa ever in Fran McCaffrey's tenure.
And this is why this stretch is huge, because Illinois recently lost. They're at 4 losses. Ohio State and us are tied, but they had that tiebreaker because they beat us. So really the big game is going to be Ohio State. If we, get both of these wins, we've pretty much almost locked ourselves into a 3 seed in the Big Ten tournament, which right now would put us, I think, against Wisconsin. I think we're 4 right now and Purdue's 5. Obviously, personally, I'd rather play Purdue. If Purdue would have to win, but I'd rather play Purdue than Wisconsin. But I think if we go 3 out of 4 with a loss against one of these 2 teams, win at least one game in the Big Ten tournament, I think that
should be
for
more
sure,
than a lock.
That for sure solidifies a 3 seed and probably puts it in to a 2 seed, depending on how other teams are doing in their respective conferences.
Mm-hmm. And I think the gap between a 2 seed and a 3 seed is massive.
It is. It's really big.
Playing a 7 seed or maybe even a 10 seed in the second round is much more of a gap than it would be playing a 6 seed.
6 or 11, because you see 11 seeds that upset 6 seeds. They're riding high. A lot of times you see those teams make the Sweet 16. Loyola Chicago, for example. Mm-hmm. There was a year, I think Middle Tennessee did it, Middle Tennessee State. So you see that's becoming more of like not a reality, but like more popular than a 10 seed making the Sweet 16. So yeah, there is a big drop off there, and a lot of times you see 6 seeds who most of those times those teams were like projected to be really good
and kind of fell off.
Yeah, kind of fell off. Like a Kansas might be a 6 seed. Iowa State that one year was a 6 seed when they had to play Ohio State.
Yep, lost to Ohio State.
Yep, and Missouri's probably gonna be a 6 seed. They're all right. Virginia Tech just recently lost.
Texas Tech might be a 6 seed.
Exactly. Those are all tough teams that have legitimate Sweet 16 potential. So I think this 2 to 3 seed, it's gonna make a big deal. So these games are really, obviously they're important because it's the 3 and 4th best team in the country. But if you looked at things in a deeper perspective, then you see, okay, this is a huge game. This week is huge. Every game from now on matters for Iowa. Looking forward to the NCAA tournament. So I'm just hoping, yeah, like I said, 3 out of 4 games, I'll be happy. Obviously, every team wants 4 out of 4, but you got to be realistic sometimes. I think we have a legitimate shot at winning all these 4 games because we're good enough to do that. But, we'll have to see.
So what do you think of Garza having a chance to set the all-time scoring record and then airballed the free throw?
I was on the, I was driving. I was actually door dashing. And that's what I was listening to it on the radio because I'm like, all right, here it is. And I couldn't see it, obviously. I don't know if he did it. Usually you can tell if he does it on purpose or not. I don't think he did. I just think the announcers.
Nerves.
Yeah, the announcers. Gary Dolphin was making it sound like he was nervous. And, yeah, I giggled when I first heard that because the announcers were like, well, maybe it was on purpose. And Gary's like, no, he's definitely nervous. He would have broke it when he could. But then he ended up getting a wide open layup, a no-look pass from Jordan Bohannon. So that was pretty cool.
To put it into, like, tennis terms, that's just kind of when you get, like, overconfident but also nervous and just completely double fault, just like when you shouldn't. That's kind of what
that's like when you're up, like, you're in the second set, you're up 5-3, 40 love, and you try to, you want to you want to win, you want to get out of there, and then you hit the net. Or, yeah, like you said, double fault because you're nervous.
But yeah, that's how I'd compare it to. But Iowa will be playing tomorrow night against Michigan. Do you want to give a score prediction for that one?
I don't know. I'll go Iowa 82, Michigan 80.
Going
with
the upset.
Yep, I'm gonna go with the upset. But like I said, last time we played in Ann Arbor, we played really well. It was last year. Garza had like 44 points. I mean, he just went off. So I can see him going off. I think he kind of has a chip on his shoulder this game because every Big Ten analysis and every NCAA analysis talking about this Hunter Dickinson kid, the 7-1 freshman. He's really good, but they all think he's a guy that can. They're all saying he's the next Luka Garza. So I can see Luka Garza coming in there and dropping 30 points and shutting everybody up, and us coming out and winning. But they're a deep team. I mean. I'm not even worried about that center. Franz Wagner is really good. Isaiah Livers is really good. And then they got 2 mature guards, veteran guards that have played in Big Ten basketball for quite some time now. So it's going to be hard. It's going to be a tough game.
Yeah, so I don't know enough about Michigan to make a score prediction, so I'll just leave it to the Big Ten expert to make it to that. But we're going to play a song, take a break, and be back with some NBA talk. We're going to be talking about NBA All-Star, who made it, who got snubbed, who didn't deserve to make it, and then we'll be also talking about a hypothetical Kristaps Porzingis trade. But until that, we'll play some Johnny Cash, it looks like. Hello and welcome back to 88.9 KSTM The Storm. This is A Dorm Divided. Jake Brend with Aaron Price. Today, we just got over our college basketball talk for the state of Iowa. I guess we didn't even mention Drake's falling off. That's really sad to see. Their best player got injured.
And then their second best player just got injured too, actually.
Yeah,
Roman Penn,
So Drake's in trouble, but we'll talk about them more in March. But right now, we are going to talk about the NBA All-Star selection. So I'm going to take us through the starters. Starting in the Eastern Conference, Kevin Durant was the highest vote getter. Not very surprising at all. Shortly after him, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Bradley Beal, Joel Embiid, Kyrie Irving. For the reserves, I guess we'll go Western starters. Western Conference starters, the highest vote getter was LeBron James, as expected. After him was Steph Curry, Luka Doncic, Nikola Jokic, and Kawhi Leonard. Eastern Conference reserves were Jaylen Brown, James Harden, Zach LaVine, Julius Randle, Ben Simmons, Jason Tatum, and Nikola Vucevic. Western Conference reserves were Anthony Davis, Paul George, Rudy Gobert, Damian Lillard, Donovan Mitchell, Chris Paul, and Zion Williamson. Doc Rivers is the coach of the Eastern Conference, and Quinn Snyder, the Utah Jazz coach, will be coaching Team LeBron. So, what were your initial reactions to hearing the 2021 All-Stars?
Well, first off, I always thought they put more than 12 people per conference in there. I thought it's okay if it's been like that forever. I think it should be like 15.
Yeah,
because like there's so many guys that should have made it that didn't. But I'm okay with the starters for the East, and I'm okay with the starters for the West. I think arguably for both conferences, those are like the top 5 players in each conference. I think you could argue that, and you'd have a legitimate argument for it.
I don't think there's anything I would change about the East. I think in the West,
I would change one thing I think Trae Young over Jaylen Brown. Trae Young's averaging 27 and 10.
Okay, so I was thinking, starters.
Oh, okay, starters. Okay, yeah, starters I'm good with.
So I think the East, they nailed the starters, but I think in the West, I would have put Damian Lillard over Luka Doncic.
Yeah, that's close. That would be a close
but
one.
That's also
2 point guards.
Yeah.
But because Dame, I guess, yeah, Dame's team's doing well right now. They're like 5th in the West,
and he's averaging a career high 29.6 points per game.
But Luke has been really good too.
So
I don't know.
The Mavs have had a swing where they're back to 500 now. I think if voting would have taken place like a week or two before, and they were still 3 or 4 games below 500. But overall, I think it's really hard to complain about the starters. But as far as reserves go, who do you think? You just mentioned Trae Young. Who were some other people that you thought were snubbed?
I don't know if like there's a lot of people that were snubbed, but like my definition of snubbed, like who would they have made it over? So like Demonis was Sabonis, I thought was snubbed, but then I look at it and I'm like, who would he replace? Maybe Ben Simmons? Ben Simmons, I don't know how he made it. He averages like 15, 8, and 8. Like, come on. He's just on the best team in the East. Who else?
I could argue Sabonis over Vucevic, but they're kind of the same situation where they both have a high usage rate. They're both very good, and they're both clearly far and away the best player on their respective team.
I think Vucevic is really underrated, so I actually like that one. I think he's really good. He's just a good overall player.
You could probably argue Sabonis over Randle.
Yeah.
But even then,
that's another one where it's like he's playing really well too, and he's got worse players on his team than Sabonis does.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
and he's carrying the Knicks to the playoffs. So I think that's what's so hard about the All-Star, and that's why I would be fine with expanding it, but it does lead this conversation to just who should have made it. And I think you could also make the argument for Bam Adebayo.
Yep.
Bam is having a career high 19.7 points per game. He helped stabilize the Heat to an extent. They're still not even in the playoff picture.
Yep.
But Bam Adebayo, you very well could have argued him over either Vucevic or Julius Randle, but that's really where it comes down to. It is fan voted.
Yeah.
And Randle is having a career year. He's averaging 23, 11, and 5.5, which I think the assist is what the most impressive part of Randle's season is.
Mm-hmm.
But Sabonis, here's a fun fact about Sabonis. He's the first player in NBA history to average 21, 10, and 5 and not make the All-Star game. So that's where I'd say in the East, especially with those players, it's kind of just syndrome of he plays on a team that no one watches.
Exactly.
The Pacers are actually on national TV tonight against the Warriors, which caught my attention. But outside of that, I don't think I've watched a Pacers game all season other than when they played the Nuggets. So that's where it's so hard. And I think moving into the Western Conference,
my one would be
Chris Paul over Devin Booker makes no sense.
That's what I was just going to say. I love Chris Paul to death, and he is really good. you could argue that Chris Paul is the best player on that team, but Devin Booker, come on. I mean, his numbers are only down because of Chris Paul, because Chris Paul is there. But, the Suns haven't been this good. They weren't this good without Chris Paul, so I don't know. Yeah, but I agree.
I get it.
I get it too.
I get putting CP3 in there. It's his 11th selection. He's got, out of everyone in there, he's been selected the second most time. He's tied with Kevin Durant behind LeBron, and he's the veteran. And he has put the Suns over the hump. They're sitting at a 4 seed right now. But I still think Devin Booker is the guy on the team. CP3 kind of similar to Devin Booker's, averaging 17, 8, and 4, which is good numbers. But I think in this scenario they should have gone with Devin Booker. But again, I understand why they went with Chris Paul. Zion Williamson was a first-time selection. I think that was very justified. Donovan Mitchell as well. Rudy Gobert is one of the ones that his stats aren't going to jump off, but his defensive impact is pretty incredible. So, for the most part, I think they hit it on the head. But Devin Booker, I think we end up talking about it every year, that he's just the ultimate snub. He deserved it, but he didn't get it.
Has he made one yet?
No. Oh, I think it's like Damian Lillard had that conversation like 3 or 4 years in a row where he just kept getting snubbed, and then eventually he got it once, and then he was in there the next 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
So I would hope that Booker gets it next year over Paul for the most part, and then he just kind of slides his way into consistently being an all-star. But if you ask anyone, I don't think anyone would choose Donovan Mitchell over Devin Booker, just like to build a franchise around. But because of Mitchell's just like role on the team and where he plays, he's made 2 All-Star games and Booker hasn't.
Yeah, Booker just recently hasn't. Booker hasn't made the playoffs yet, and that's where a big thing comes of it. Like most people, if you're a non-NBA fan, you usually don't watch NBA regular season, and then you see the playoffs are on, every single game's on TV. That's when you see people starting to watch it. No one's ever seen Booker play in the playoffs yet. People have seen Donovan Mitchell every year he's been in the league. So that also plays a big part of it too. Once you have to make the playoffs too. And granted, Booker hasn't had a great team around him, but this year he does. So yeah, I see him. He'll be fine. And I don't know if he probably cares, but I'm sure he's got bigger things he's got to worry about.
At the end of the day, it's just a fantasy selection, and they don't really care that much. I mean, a lot of the players were pushing back a couple weeks ago that they were even having the game.
Yeah.
But here's one player that probably wouldn't be expected to be undeserving, I guess. But just as far as stats go, I think you can make the argument for Devin Booker against Paul George. So Booker's averaging 24.7 points a game, which is exactly what Paul George is averaging, 24.6. Booker's averaging less rebounds and 1 less assist while shooting slightly more efficient from the field. And I would put Paul George in there over Devin Booker, but I think that's also a discussion worth having.
You see the same offensive stats there, but it's pretty clear here the better defensive player is on that, in between those two, and who is a more impactful player.
Yeah. But I would hope one of these days Devin Booker gets selected. And have they announced if they're doing like a dunk contest in 3?
Yeah, they are.
Did they announce who's in it yet?
No, but it's like the same time, like it's all the same day. So I'm not sure. They usually do a rookie all-star, Rising Stars game. Yeah. I'm not sure if they're doing that, but yeah, I don't know.
That's probably going to do it for our all-star talk.
Who do you want to see in the dunk contest?
Well, Zach LaVine, as always.
I don't think
Zion.
Do people that make the All-Star game usually play in those though?
Sometimes they do. Like when Dwight Howard won it with the Superman, that was like when he was in his prime, so he would have been an All-Star.
I think when Blake Griffin won his, he was an All-Star.
I think you got to go Zion Williamson. He's the NBA's rising star. And he's known for his dunking abilities. Zach LaVine. It's really hard to go against like Derrick Jones Jr. He's a stud.
Yeah, he can hoop. I wouldn't see Anthony Edwards. He put a dude on a poster recently. I like him. I think he's gonna be pretty good.
Yeah, I swear it's every night. He's just got another dunk that is like, wow, how did he do that? Jumping over, having his head above the rim, or having his arms above the rim.
Yep.
Yeah, that Anthony Edwards would be a fun one. Let's see some other All-Stars that might be. Well, there's Donovan Mitchell.
Yeah, Donovan Mitchell.
He won the one in 2018. I always think it'd be fun to see someone like Anthony Davis or LeBron do it.
Yeah.
Even Giannis, but I don't think
those guys
are
don't
ever
do
going to do it.
I want to see Russell Westbrook do it, but he can't dunk like he used to anymore.
And even though, like, Russ's dunks are all cool just because he's going at like such a high speed and he just throws it down really hard. But after, like, I've never seen him just, I don't know. His effective dunking isn't the same as anyone else's.
Yeah.
I don't think he would do well in a dunk contest.
He can jump high though. But he's a bit shorter than everyone else. I guess Donovan Mitchell and him are probably like the same height, so he might be able to, but not anymore. He doesn't dunk as much anymore.
I think Ben Simmons would be interesting in a dunk contest.
I don't know if I've ever seen Ben Simmons dunk on anyone.
They should put Ben Simmons in the 3-point contest to see if he can make a single one.
That would be kind of funny.
Nikola Jokic should do the 3-point contest. He's not as good at open threes as he is like when he's got Rudy Gobert in his face.
I always love watching the 3-point contests. I like having all those guys like you see like Joe Harris and Davis Bertans. Those guys that they should get credit for their shooting, and then they get in these, and that's how they get kind of their name out there.
Duncan Robinson.
Yep. I'd love to see those type of guys. Hopefully they get invited and they do it. So.
Yeah, I say we move into the trade rumors that kind of came out of nowhere. Kristaps Porzingis was reportedly involved in like very small trade talks with the Dallas Mavericks. Mark Cuban came out and said that it was false. Nothing was happening. But I think just for argument's sake, like that would be the biggest name involved in any trade talk all year. He's the number 2 option for the Dallas Mavericks, and he's averaging, I'm going to pull up his stats real quick. I think he's averaging over like 22 points a game.
Yeah, he hasn't been playing as of lately, though. I don't know what happened to him. Like, I know he didn't play last night there on TV.
He's just literally always hurt. Yeah. Pretty much no matter what's going on.
It sucks.
Pretty much no matter what season, he has to battle some sort of injury. So I think Porzingis and Doncic work well together, but I don't think they're perfect fits either. Like, I don't think his style of play exactly replicates Doncic.
Well, they both are slower paced players, and they play at their own pace. I can see him working well. Like you won't ever see a 2-man game out of them. You know what I mean? Like you won't see Kristaps set a screen for Doncic. You usually see like Kleber do that or Willie Cauley-Stein. But in a couple let's see what day it was. It was it might have been last Friday or 2 Fridays ago. They were playing New Orleans on ESPN on a Friday. Yeah. And I saw Kristaps. It was kind of Luka Willie Cauley-Stein set a screen, and Kristaps could kind of sit in like the corner or outside the 3-point range. And he started off like 4 for 4 from like 3. And so I think that's like more of how they play together. But Kristaps is kind of a weirder post player. He just is like, he can shoot. He kind of reminds me of Jokic a little bit, except Jokic is a better passer. But they're taller guys who kind of play at a slower pace, but they're also really good. I mean, Porzingis is very valuable. He just is hurt all the time. But I think those two will be fine. I think they actually have a decent team around them. They just struggle at playing defense because they're slower than everyone else.
I think what I was going to say was what's lacking is their supporting cast.
I like their offensive supporting cast. I really do. I like Tim Hardaway Jr. I like Josh Richardson. Those are guys that Josh Richardson was really good for the Heat before he got traded for Jimmy Butler. And Tim Hardaway has always been like a 16-point game guy that you get. And I think those are the guys they want around Luka, because he likes to drive and he wants to lane open and then he can kick to his shooters. But
I don't think that's the cast that's taking them to anything more than a 6 seed, though, is the problem.
I don't know. I mean, I think it actually does have the potential, but they don't. Yeah, because Hardaway can't play defense. Josh Richardson is all right at defense. Their center is not very good, whoever it is. I don't even know if it's
Kleber.
Yeah, he's like.
And Boban is the backup who is ancient.
So, Yeah, it's definitely not a team that you can see making a run, but I don't think they should get rid of anyone. They just got to add a few more pieces, in my opinion.
Yeah, so what I looked up, it was a article from radio.com, and they had 4 different landing spots for Porzingis if they were to make a trade. And top of the list was actually Chicago for Lauri Markkanen and Otto Porter Jr. in a pick.
Okay.
So, I mean,
That's
trading.
That's a good trade
like,
for the Mavericks. Not a good trade for the Bulls.
Porzingis is pretty much just a better Markkanen.
Yeah.
Like, they're the same type of player.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Porzingis with Zach LaVine would be really fun. But I think what you're talking about, adding better players, adding Markkanen to Doncic, I mean, obviously he's not going to be as good as Porzingis, but adding another capable shooter in Otto Porter Jr. and then a pick in the upcoming year's draft, that could maybe be packaged with something else for a trade in the offseason or just used to support Luka. The next team I saw was Golden State Warriors for Andrew Wiggins. They've got like an identical contract and picks, which I think would be a dream for Golden State.
Yeah, that would be.
But I don't know how I would feel about Andrew Wiggins, who's a ball-dominant player, playing with Luka Doncic, who's also very ball-dominant. Yeah. I'm just not a huge Andrew Wiggins fan. What do you think of that?
I'm not. I've never been a big Wiggins fan. He just kind of, there's something that doesn't click in his head. Like you didn't just see him. He was lazy in Minnesota. He's been a little bit better, but his scoring, like, I don't know. He should be better than what he is. I'm not a big Andrew Wiggins guy either, though. I don't think he'd work well with Doncic. He doesn't really work well anywhere. Like, he just is. He's got to be the best player on the team, but he's not the best player on the team, so we need to figure that out.
Yeah, I don't even think he could be the second best player on a team and that team be a legitimate playoff.
I mean, right now he's probably, you could argue he's the second best player on the Warriors, but yeah, I don't know. Maybe they can go somewhere.
The Warriors are an 8 seed right now, just behind the Nuggets in the West. But I think Porzingis with Steph Curry would just be a beautiful fit.
Mm-hmm.
Catching lobs, especially being able to play off of a center like James Wiseman, where you don't have to be expected. One problem with Porzingis, he averages 3.5 fouls a game, so he gets in foul trouble. If you can kind of ease him off the defensive pressure, maybe one, that'll help his health. He'll get less tired, less fatigue, less injuries. And 2, it'll just give him more shots on the perimeter, because when Steph Curry is at the top of the key, you're always going to want him doubled. And when James Wiseman's down in the post, you're most likely going to want him doubled, so that's going to leave a lot of opportunities for Kristaps Porzingis on the perimeter, cutting in, and then add Klay Thompson back into that mix next year. Draymond Green still exists. I think if they were able to swing that, which one I don't think Dallas would ever take that, they'd have to give up more to give up Porzingis. But I think that would be a dream trade for the Warriors.
Yeah, I would agree.
The next one was Atlanta for John Collins, John Collins is on an expiring deal.
Yeah,
he wants like the max contract.
Yeah, I think Atlanta's taking calls about him for trades.
Mm-hmm. So it'd be John Collins and some picks also, which I think could be very interesting. John Collins is a very bouncy player, really good at catching lobs.
Yeah, a guy that Luka could throw up lobs to. Yeah, that wouldn't be bad, but like I said, I don't think they're going to trade Porzingis. Or Cuban already denied him. Porzingis could fit well in multiple places, but yeah, I don't see the point in trading him right now.
And yeah, I agree with that. And Atlanta getting Porzingis wouldn't fix their defensive issues either. That would just, it would just give you another shot blocker. But I guess it would give you a wash because Collins can block shots too, and you already have Capella. And just for discussion's sakes, the last one they had didn't really make that much sense. They had Charlotte, Terry Rozier, and picks for Porzingis, which I think Rozier and Luka would be very interesting together. But to me, on paper, that doesn't make sense for either team.
No, I agree.
So we've got about 5 minutes left. So I say we talk about the Nuggets win last night. They broke an NBA record. Did you see the record that they broke?
No, but it looks like you wrote down on here they only had 1 turnover.
1 turnover for the entire team.
Turnover and you score 107 points. You should score way more than that.
I don't know how that's even possible, scoring or having just 1 turnover. Well, I guess when you have Monte Morris on the team, who is famous for never turning the ball over. But usually Jokic, as good as a passer Jokic is, he's good for like 4 turnovers a game, just because sometimes he'll see someone open up their legs a little bit, try and throw it between their legs, and it'll kick off his foot and it'll lead to a turnover. But I think I don't remember what the stat I saw was, but there'd been teams that had gotten 2 before. But the Nuggets were the first in NBA history to have just 1 turnover in a game. I mean, just looking at the box score, I'm gonna find out who had the only turnover.
Jamal.
It was Jamal Murray, which is not surprising. But yeah, you'd think you'd score more than 111 points off of doing that. They just shot 42.6% from the floor, which isn't bad. And they forced 9 turnovers. So it was a pretty clean game all around. They had an assist to turnover ratio of 25-1. I don't know the number on that, but that's probably got to be the best in NBA history, you'd think.
Yeah, probably, I would assume.
Because I don't think a team's ever had 50. So they'd have to have a 50-2 to even match that. So
yeah,
probably the best assist to turnover ratio. Very impressive win for the Nuggets. They won that game without Gary Harris, without PJ Dozier, Paul Millsap, and I'm missing one player. It'll come to me. JaMychal Green. So off the bench, they had Zeke Naji, Isaiah Hartenstein, and Facu Campazzo. So not exactly the best bench in the world, but the Nuggets were able to beat Portland, which Portland didn't have CJ McCollum, which definitely helped. But
yeah, Portland's out with a lot of guys too.
Yeah, but nonetheless, Denver extended their season series against Portland to 10 out of the last 12. They completely owned them in the regular season. But it was a fun game to watch. I know that you watched the game and made some friendly bets with Luke.
Yep.
And was glad to see that happen. But Jokic is playing, again, just some of the best basketball in the entire NBA. He had 41 points on 17 of 32 shooting, 5 assists, 5 rebounds. It's just, he's an impossible guy to stop. Especially, there's like a few certain players that he loves going off against in the league, and Enes Kanter's one of them, just because Kanter couldn't stop me on the basketball court. He's a good offensive player, but he's one of the worst defensive centers in the league.
Yeah,
so Jokic had a heyday with him, and Nuggets looked good. They're finally looking decent again. They've won 4 in a row, but they're at the point where they're limping to the All-Star break, just waiting to get guys healthy.
Yeah. Looks like here that I was just looking at the standings in the Western Conference, and there's going to be quite a few teams. Well, not quite a few, but there's 9 teams I would want to see in the playoffs, and obviously only 8 can make it.
Mm-hmm.
So I see the Spurs are 5th right now. I haven't really been paying attention to them, but they must be playing pretty well. They have like that young Murray point guard and DeRozan.
DeJounte.
Yeah, DeJounte Murray and DeRozan and Aldridge. But like I feel like they didn't make any moves to like be good. They're just kind of right there.
That is the Popovich effect.
Yeah.
Where you give him a team that's good enough and he's going to make them good.
Yeah, so and then you see Dallas and New Orleans that aren't in the playoffs right now, and I would like to see those are my 2 teams that aren't in that I want to see in the playoffs. And I even argue I don't know, I don't really want to see Memphis, but I mean, I like John Morant. He's pretty good.
John Morant's fun to watch.
Yeah.
The problem with with New Orleans is just their roster construction is just awful.
Yeah, I like to see all like the good players get into the playoffs. So you see like Ingram and Williamson are really good, and Doncic is good. So you want to see all like the top players in the West make it, but one of them's not going to do it. So hopefully,
I wouldn't be opposed to seeing Dallas jump San Antonio at some point.
Yeah,
just because
it would. I think you're probably going to see it, but maybe you won't. I don't know.
Yeah. There's always one team that just falls off in the second half of the season.
Yeah.
But I think that's going to do it for this week on A Dorm Divided on 88.9 KSTM The Storm. For Jake Brend and Aaron Price, we want to thank you for listening and wish you good weather.
Yep.
Enjoy the weather. We'll see you next week.